There's something incredibly painful about not being respected. It stings, it shakes us. Sometimes it even makes us question who we are. And when that lack of respect comes from people we care about, or people we work with, people we try to help, it's even harder to swallow. And here's the truth that most people miss. The respect we're desperate to receive from others should never be greater than the respect we have for ourselves. That's where everything starts. That's the foundation. You don't build respect by demanding it from the outside. You build it by deeply believing in your own worth on the inside. See, when someone disrespects us, our instinct is often to fight it, to explain ourselves, to prove we're worthy. But the moment we start doing that, we've already given their opinion too much power. Because when someone disrespects you, they're making a statement about themselves. Not about you. They're revealing their character, their perspective, their unresolved issues. It feels personal, but it's not. Still, we take it personally. Why? Because we're human. Because deep down, all of us want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to matter. And respect feels like proof that we do. But the dangerous thing is when we start using that external respect to measure our internal value. That's when we get stuck. The problem is, the world doesn't always reward what's right. It rewards what's loud, it rewards what's shiny. It rewards what's useful to it in the moment. So if you base your value on how others treat you, you're on a roller coaster you'll never be able to control. But there's an alternative, a quieter one, a more powerful one. It's this. Know your worth. And don't announce it. Live it. Believe it, make it the foundation of how you walk through the world. Because here's the secret. People who truly know their worth don't need to prove it. They carry it in how they speak, how they listen, how they respond when they're overlooked, how they hold themselves in a room where no one gives them credit. Think about the people you admire most. The leaders you trust, the mentors who changed your life. Were they the loudest in the room? Or were they the ones who radiated something deeper? Something steady, calm, centered? That presence doesn't come from ego, it comes from self-respect. And self-respect doesn't need permission. Now that doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect. But it means you choose how you respond to it. And the most powerful response is often no reaction at all. Not because you're afraid to speak up, but because you've already decided who you are, and you're not letting someone else rewrite your story. There's a line that changed my life. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but sit with it. Because most of the time, the disrespect we feel doesn't come from what they said. It comes from what we believed when they said it. We let it in. We gave it meaning. We gave it roots. But when you know your worth, truly know it, disrespect doesn't take root. It bounces off. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it didn't define you. It's not easy, let's be clear about that. Knowing your worth is a daily practice. It's not a one-time declaration. It's something you reinforce in how you treat yourself, how you speak to yourself, and what you tolerate in your life. Every time you choose dignity over drama, every time you choose calm over chaos, every time you choose silence over the need to be right, you're affirming your value. You're reminding yourself that your peace is not up for grabs. And eventually people notice. Not because you demanded their respect, but because you made it clear you didn't need it to stand tall. There's a quiet kind of confidence that comes from knowing who you are. It doesn't shout. It doesn't perform. It doesn't chase validation, and oddly enough, that's the kind of presence that ends up earning the most respect, not because it asked for it, but because it modeled it. Now, some people won't respect you no matter what. That's a reality. Maybe they're threatened by you. Maybe they don't understand you. Maybe they're fighting battles you'll never see. But that doesn't change your worth. Their inability to recognize your value doesn't lower it. It just reveals their own limitations. When you know your worth, you stop trying to get even. You start trying to rise above. And in doing that, you set a standard. Not just for how others should treat you, but for how they should treat themselves. Because people don't always do what you say, but they pay attention to how you live. You want to be respected, start by respecting yourself, especially in rooms where that respect is missing. Start by speaking kindly to yourself when others speak carelessly. Start by showing up fully, even when you feel invisible. That's leadership. That's courage. That's strength. And eventually, the right people, the people who see clearly, who lead with integrity, who know how to honor others, will find you. And you'll know them not because they praise you, but because they understand you. And when they do, it won't be surprising. It'll feel like alignment. Like confirmation of what you already knew, that your worth was never missing. It was just waiting for the world to catch up. So if the next time someone doesn't respect you, don't try to fix them. Don't try to prove yourself. Just remember who you are and walk in it. Quietly, boldly, consistently. That's how respect is earned. That's how it lasts. There's a moment in every interaction, especially the hard ones, where we get to make a decision. A split-second choice. Do we react or do we respond? That difference might seem small, but it's everything. It's the space between chaos and clarity, between ego and purpose, between letting someone else dictate who we are and choosing to lead ourselves even in the middle of discomfort. When someone disrespects us, the natural human instinct is to defend, to push back, to let the anger do the talking. It's raw. It's immediate. It feels powerful in the moment, but that kind of power is short-lived. Because it's not power rooted in self-control. It's power borrowed from pain. And pain is a terrible compass. It doesn't point us toward growth. It points us toward reaction. It invites us into a cycle that never ends. They attack, we retaliate, they escalate, and so on. No one wins in that space. But when we lead with curiosity instead of ego, we're doing something radical. We're choosing to see beyond the behavior. We're asking, what's behind this? What's this person really struggling with? What would make someone feel the need to speak or act that way? Now, that doesn't mean we excuse the behavior. It means we understand it. And understanding isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It allows us to see the situation with clarity instead of through the blur of emotion. The truth is, most people who don't show respect to others are battling something inside themselves. Insecurity, fear, jealousy, pain that hasn't been named or processed. And the way they express that inner battle is through outward disrespect. It's easier to tear someone else down than it is to confront your own reflection. We've all seen this. Maybe we've even done it, if we're honest. Because when we feel threatened, when we feel small, it's tempting to make someone else feel smaller. But the difference between reacting from pain and responding with purpose is the difference between being controlled and being conscious. And conscious leadership always asks, what's really going on here? Curiosity creates space. Space to breathe, space to choose, space to not let the other person's behavior define our response. That space is where self-respect lives. That space is where composure is born. When we ask questions instead of launching accusations, we reclaim control of the moment and we communicate something powerful without even saying it. I'm not here to match your energy. I'm here to protect mine. It's easy to misunderstand this approach as passivity, but make no mistake, this is not weakness. This is strength with direction. This is restraint with vision. It takes far more courage to stay grounded than it does to lash out. And that courage often becomes the very thing that causes others to shift their own behavior. When someone comes at you with disrespect and you choose to stay curious, to stay open instead of closed, you're not just responding differently. You're teaching, you're modeling, you're showing them, perhaps for the first time, what emotional maturity looks like. You're breaking a pattern they may not even realize they're stuck in. There's something powerful about asking questions when most people would throw accusations, not passive-aggressive questions, not rhetorical questions, but real honest ones. Is everything okay? Did something happen that's affecting the way we're talking right now? Is there something we need to clear up? Those kinds of questions don't just diffuse tension. They invite accountability. They call people to rise without pushing them away. And even if the other person doesn't respond well, even if they double down on their behavior, you've already won. Because you stayed in control of yourself. You honored your values. You kept your integrity intact. And that's a kind of success that lasts much longer than getting the last word. You don't need to have the final say to have the final impact. The way you carry yourself in the face of disrespect speaks louder than anything you could say in defense of yourself. That calm presence, that self-composure, it lingers in people's minds, even if they don't admit it, even if they pretend they weren't affected. They were. Because somewhere deep inside, we all recognize strength when we see it. And sometimes the people who disrespect you the most are the ones watching you the closest. Not because they admire you, at least not yet, but because they don't understand you. Because you represent something they haven't yet figured out in themselves, and that confusion can come out sideways in the form of mockery or aggression or indifference. But if you stay curious, you don't become part of the noise. You become something else entirely. You become an example. And that example might plant a seed, a small one maybe, but a seed nonetheless. And over time, seeds grow. Especially when they're watered with consistency, with patience, and with kindness that has boundaries. Curiosity does something else too. It keeps us human. It reminds us that the people who hurt us are people too. Flawed, struggling, complicated, just like we are. That doesn't make their behavior okay, but it helps us stay compassionate without being naive. Because at the end of the day, we don't handle disrespect by lowering ourselves to someone else's level. We handle it by staying anchored in who we are, by asking better questions, by choosing clarity over chaos, and by remembering that how we respond says more about us than their disrespect ever could. We don't have to match their energy. We can rise above it, not because we're better, but because we've chosen to be better in that moment. And when you make that choice often enough, you don't just protect your peace. You create a standard. One that says, this is how people are treated in my presence. This is how I treat others. And this is how I treat myself. And that's how change starts. Not with big speeches or dramatic confrontations, but with a quiet, consistent decision to stay curious, to stay kind, to stay strong, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because respect, in the end, isn't just something we expect from others. It's something we lead with, something we extend, even when it's not returned. And that kind of leadership, it doesn't go unnoticed. It transforms everything it touches. Boundaries are one of the most misunderstood tools in relationships. Some people think they're walls. Others see them as acts of defiance. But in truth, boundaries are neither. They're not there to push people away. They exist to bring clarity to connection, to define what's okay and what's not. And when you're dealing with people who don't respect you, boundaries become essential, not because you're trying to punish them, but because you're trying to protect yourself. There's a myth that in order to keep the peace, we have to keep quiet. That if we speak up, set limits, or say no, we're creating conflict. But the reality is, silence is not always peace. Sometimes silence is just permission for someone else to keep crossing lines. And every time we let that happen, every time we say nothing, do nothing, or go alone just to avoid discomfort, we send a message, not just to them, but to ourselves. We teach people how to treat us, but we also teach ourselves what we think we're worth. The challenge is that setting boundaries doesn't always feel good. It can be uncomfortable, awkward, even painful, especially when the people you're setting them with are close to you. Family, friends, co-workers, people you've known for years. But here's the thing, boundaries aren't about pushing people out. They're about drawing a line so love, respect, and trust can live within it. They're about saying, I value this relationship enough to be honest about what I need. That's not cruelty. That's courage. Too often we think we have to choose, either tolerate the disrespect or cut people off completely. But there's a third path, a stronger one. It's where you don't burn bridges, but you don't let people walk all over you either. It's the space where grace and firmness coexist, where your kindness doesn't make you a doormat and your strength doesn't make you hard. People who disrespect you often rely on your silence, on your discomfort, on your desire to keep things smooth, even at your own expense. They push because they can, not always out of malice, sometimes just out of habit. But when you calmly, consistently set a boundary, you interrupt the pattern. And when you do it without anger, without revenge, but with clarity, something powerful happens. You change the conversation. Stop reacting and start leading. And leadership, true leadership, begins with self-respect. It begins with the decision to no longer negotiate your dignity. Not for approval, not for peace, not even for love. Because the moment you start bargaining with your own worth, the foundation of every relationship you're in begins to crack. Boundaries are what keep that foundation solid. Now, some people won't like your boundaries. That's expected. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone will agree. Some may call you cold, distant, selfish. But that says more about their expectations than your intentions. When people are used to benefiting from your lack of boundaries, your clarity will feel like rejection. But clarity is not cruelty, it's honesty. And honesty is one of the highest forms of respect you can give to others and to yourself. The key is to communicate those boundaries without blame. Not you always do this or you never respect me, but rather, here's what I need moving forward. That kind of language doesn't point fingers, it opens doors. It invites dialogue instead of defensiveness. And even if the other person doesn't accept it, you've still shown up with integrity. You've made your values known. And that's enough. Boundaries also aren't one-time declarations. They're not just something you say, they're something you live. You reinforce them through your actions, through follow-through, through the quiet consistency of saying no when you need to, and saying yes only when it aligns with your values. You don't need to explain them endlessly. You don't need to debate them. You just need to live them. And in time, people adjust, or they don't. But either way, you've honored yourself. There's a deep peace that comes from living in alignment with what you believe, a kind of groundedness that doesn't require applause or agreement. When you live with clear boundaries, you no longer spend your energy managing other people's expectations. You free up space mentally, emotionally, to focus on the things that matter, to give your best energy to the people who respect you, to invest in relationships that feed you, not drain you. And when you live this way long enough, something beautiful happens. You attract people who value clarity, who appreciate honesty, who respect your boundaries because they have their own. These relationships don't require constant explanation. They don't demand that you shrink or stretch just to keep the connection alive. They exist in mutual respect, mutual trust, and mutual understanding. But it starts with you, with the decision to stop hoping others will treat you better and start treating yourself better first. To stop waiting for people to change and to change the way you engage with them. Boundaries aren't about fixing others. They're about leading yourself. And when you do that with grace and courage, you create ripple effects that go far beyond the initial conversation. You show people what's possible, you model healthy behavior, you demonstrate what self-respect looks like in action, and in doing that, you give others permission to do the same. Not everyone will follow that example, but the right people will. And the rest, they'll either adapt or make room for something better. So, the next time someone disrespects you, don't retaliate, don't collapse into silence. Take a breath, step back, ask yourself, what do I need in this situation to feel respected, safe, and seen? Then say it, live it, honor it, and keep showing up with consistency. You don't have to shout, you don't have to argue, you don't have to fight fire with fire. Just set your boundary and let your actions teach the rest. That's not confrontation. That's leadership. That's respect in its highest form, the kind that starts within and radiates outward. Quiet, strong, unshakable. One of the hardest things we'll ever have to learn is this. We don't get to control how people treat us, but we do get to control what we accept. That distinction is everything. Because disrespect, no matter where it comes from, doesn't have the final say. What gives it power is our response. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is walk away, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of respect for ourselves and clarity about what we deserve. Now, this isn't about ghosting people. It's not about turning your back on every difficult interaction. This is about discernment. It's about understanding the difference between someone who made a mistake and someone who makes a pattern out of disregarding your worth. It's about giving people room to be human, but not giving them permission to repeatedly cross your boundaries while hiding behind the excuse of just being honest or just joking or that's just how I am. You can have empathy and standards at the same time. In fact, real empathy requires it. Because when we allow people to treat us in ways that slowly erode our peace, our confidence, our values, we're not being kind, we're abandoning ourselves. And self-abandonment over time builds resentment toward them, toward ourselves, and eventually toward the very life we're trying to create. There's a moment, a defining one, that comes when you've given someone chance after chance. You've explained yourself. You've asked for better. You've tried to meet them where they are, and still nothing changes. That's the moment where walking away becomes not just an option, but an act of leadership. Because leadership isn't about fixing people. It's not about carrying the weight of their behavior. It's about modeling what healthy looks like. And sometimes the most powerful way to model respect is by removing yourself from environments where it's not present, not as a punishment, but as a statement. I choose to live in alignment with what I believe, not just what I'm used to. We stay too long sometimes. In jobs where we're undervalued, in friendships that leave us depleted, in partnerships that make us question our worth. And we stay not because we're weak, but because we're hopeful. We hope things will change. We hope they'll finally see us. We hope they'll treat us the way we treat them. But hope without boundaries turns into a trap. And eventually, it teaches us to expect less, not just from others, but from life. So here's the truth. Walking away isn't failure. It's not giving up. It's not dramatic. It's not cruel. It's clarity. It's choosing your well-being over a connection that costs you your peace. It's recognizing that you can love someone and still outgrow the version of yourself that tolerates their behavior. And it's knowing that closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes it comes from a decision. But let's be honest, it's not easy. Walking away can be one of the most painful things you'll ever do, because it often requires grieving something that's still alive, a relationship that still has good moments, a person who still has potential, a situation that isn't all bad, but isn't good enough. That in-between space